Hello, and welcome to another episode of Thrive Like a Parent podcast. Today, I am so excited to have Dr. Tracy Dalgleish, and she is a clinical psychologist, couples therapist, and sought after relationship expert. And she's been doing this for over 15 years. She's provided direct clinical services to couples and has dedicated her time to researching, writing, and speaking about relationships. Tracy, thank you so much for doing this and for being here. I know we've wanted to do this for a while, and we have so many common colleagues and friendships based on honestly who we've made friends with, honestly, through Instagram. So I'm so glad you're
Yes,
here.
I'm so glad.
And I would love for you to tell everyone a little bit about yourself and welcome.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Brooke. I'm so glad we finally get to do this. It's been on our radar the last, gosh, it feels like a few years for sure. You've covered the basics in terms of me being a psychologist and couples therapist, but I think the story that really resonates the most with me is how I thought doing my PhD would be the hardest thing that I would ever do, sitting in a room, writing on the same topic, spending years on this thing. And then I became a mother,
Mm,
and that was a really challenging experience. And it really turned things upside down for me. And
mm,
not only becoming a mom to one, but then adding in my second. And I remember in the depths of the Canadian winter, I was nursing my second in the basement watching TV and really feeling dissatisfied around the discourse for relationships in the public in the general media. And at that moment I thought, okay, I really want to reach more people. It's something so important to me. I know that's a value that you share as well. And so I started blogging, I started contributing to media sites, I started my Instagram space and then the podcast and my membership space where I teach people all about relationships and how to have a healthy one in your partnership. And then here we are today. And it's been incredible to reach people all over the world with resources and tools that you can actually use at home.
mhm.
And that is so important to me. So, on top of this part of work, on top of being a mom, I'm also the owner of the mental health clinic here in Ottawa called Integrated Wellness. And my husband and I are in business together in terms of navigating all the things behind the scenes.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for sharing all that. You absolutely have a full load, if you will, between having a social media presence and having, do you have clients of your own and still see clients? So you still see
Yes.
clients and
Yeah.
having a clinic, brick and mortar, which I've done before. And
Yes.
that's a beast in itself, and you're multitasking and doing it all. So thank you so much for sharing all of that. I always love asking the question, who were you before you were this Tracy? Like, what led you to this point in your life? Like, is the path that has led you to specifically where you've come to be in your life now?
That's a big one. There is this part of me that has been driven to do all the things. And I think part of that is also this younger part of me that was sold the message that there was something wrong with me for having too big emotions, for
Mm,
being too sensitive, for being too much. And it wasn't until it was before I got married, sitting in my own therapy session, where my therapist sat across from me saying, what if this way of being is actually who you are meant to be and it helps you to do the work that you're doing?
mhm,
And it was the first time that someone had actually given me this reframe. Of course, going through the program, I was helping my own clients at the time reframe their own implicit beliefs about themselves. And yet, it wasn't until another psychologist sat across from me saying, this is a strength of yours. It's not a weakness. So, growing up in a society where we are viewing emotional experiences, tuning into our bodies or feeling deeply in our bodies as something as being bad, rather than understanding this is who we are and what we bring forward.
mhm,
So when I think of the before Tracy today, and there's other parts of me still in here, she felt insecure as if she was too much or there was something wrong with her. She felt like everything she had to do was perfect before she could actually release and launch things. She felt unsure of herself in terms of even being a parent. And I always like to say parts because I believe they're still within me. They just aren't as loud anymore.
Sure. Sure. Yeah. Thank you for sharing all that. I love that you recognize that and then you took steps forward. And I think that so many can relate to that and so many can identify with that. And I do believe that that voice from within, no matter where that story came from, whether honestly it was intentional or unintentional from childhood or from our parents or from, I don't know, like the mean girl on the playground, like whatever it was, that does absolutely show up for us in different ways. And it is that little voice. And I would say, hands down, that sometimes what drives individuals to even build a career and have the expansive career that they have is simply because it's that drive of watch what I can do. Like watch what I
Watch
can
me.
do.
Watch me.
And
Yeah.
what's interesting is I got a little bit of that from my childhood, not intentionally. It was just school was not easy for me. And my parents absolutely had to like push me to like get to where I was. And I was like, let me make mistakes on my own. Like, I got this. And I would hands down say the reason that I have my doctorate is because I wanted to prove that I could do it and be like, you see, like I can do this. And of course, all along the way, I've released a ton of that, but I'm so appreciative and grateful that you shared that. Um, and I would love to know a little bit about how that has affected and morphed into even your relationship with your partner, as well as like how has that morphed into what you see with other partnerships and couples.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, when I think of even how we show up in our relationships in general, we carry this suitcase with us of all of our previous experiences. And if we haven't opened up the suitcase and unpack it and understand what's inside of it, we are going to show up repeating those same patterns.
Mm,
And so, even if I think of my own experience, if I'm continuing to tell myself I'm too sensitive, I'm too much of a burden, what are the behaviors I do as a result of that? I take on all the things.
mm-hmm.
I carry the full load. I don't ask for help. I don't ask for my needs to be met. Sure, you want me to go do this? Yes, I'll go do that, right? Someone with more porous boundaries would buy into that narrative to just keep doing all the things. And so, part of what we all need to do in our relationships is to look within ourselves and say, how am I showing up here
Mm-hmm.
with all of the things that I know within myself of what it means to be me? What another person is, and what the world looks like. We all carry these beliefs, these implicit narratives and stories inside of us. And sometimes they're not even fully conscious yet.
Mm-hmm.
And then in our dynamic of being able to understand when I do this, how am I influencing you? And how can I look at both of these pieces? And it takes a lot of work because in couples, of course, we're asking both people
Yep.
to show up and say, look at my suitcase.
Mm-hmm.
I've looked at it. There's a lot of stuff in there.
Yeah.
Let's unpack it a little,
Yeah.
but also then let's create our journey together. But
Yeah.
to not like I'm not throwing my clothes over on my husband saying, here, wear this. This is all yours. I'm not projecting it out to him,
Right.
but rather those moments of saying, oh, and actually, as I'm saying this, I keep remembering this story where I think I was pushing the stroller, so our newborn daughter and my toddler on his little strider bike, the balance bike, and we're about to cross the street. I see a car in the distance, and I say to my little guy, "We have to go. Let's go. We're crossing now." And he's putting up a fuss. I give him a nudge. We cross over, and then he just yells at me. He throws the bike. He starts to yell at me, and I feel myself just get flooded. And so yep, picked it up, got the bike. He kept going. And in that moment, I felt so much shame come over me that I
Mm.
said to my husband, I'm leaving. I'm not going on this walk with all of you. You continue forward. I need to like just leave. And he did something that was so different because in the moment, my stuff was showing up as a parent, as a person. My old stuff, my own experiences were showing up. And in that moment, he says, no, stay. you've got this. We're all good together. We're going to work through this. We're okay. And I stayed and I had to ride that wave of emotion, which is so much of what we do.
Mm-hmm.
And then we were worked through it. But it was so interesting because there was this sliver of something that I had never experienced before and been able to label, but then being able to do something different. And that to me is where partnerships really want to feel like team members, because he's not, so my husband, he's not coming to me saying, get over it. This is ridiculous. Why would you want to leave? Or he's not shaming me in any additional way, but instead he says, we're good. We're going through this together. I am that partner for you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Thank you for sharing all that. I absolutely have a suitcase, and I would say I have a suitcase with bricks in it. And um, I just couldn't help, as I was just listening to everything you're saying, it is one thing to want to change the patterns from our past, right? Like, I am now in a committed relationship of 2.5 years. And before that, I was with Jonathan for 10 years and over 10 years. And I knew I knew so desperately what I didn't want to happen again. But the want versus the reality is so much different, because when I tell you it has taken effort and it has taken work, I would even say probably the entire first year that I dated Carter, I was literally looking, like, every little thing. I was looking for a pattern, or I was looking for something to be like, yep, he's going to do that again. Nope, this is not
Right.
safe for me. Yep, I'm running. And I literally am saying, like, I'm running, because I look back at that and see that I was trying to protect myself. And I probably still have so many walls up, but he and I work through it. And I love that your husband has offered you that safety of, like, no, stay. The hardest part in hearing that, and I know you're going to agree with me, is that I'm sure you've worked with multiple people, and I have worked with hundreds of people who are like, yeah, nope, that's not mine. That's not my partner. Like, my partner's not like,
Yeah.
no, like, I'm happy to listen to you. I was going to say most, and I shouldn't say that, but like, some partners are like, get the fuck over it. Like,
Yeah.
I don't understand why you're still crying. Like, move
Right.
on.
Right.
And I would love to hear from you your response of how does a partner, let's say someone is working really hard to make the relationship work. How does someone work on that when the other partner is kind of shutting down? I would call it the vulnerability side of a relationship, or shutting down that communication, honestly.
There's always this two parts in this. And the first part is really being able to go to our partners and saying what it is that we feel and need. We're
Mm-hmm.
advocating for ourselves. And even for women, that takes a lot to do. That's very hard. Also, for men who struggle to identify and share emotions, that's also really hard. So I find women tend to struggle with sharing needs. Men tend to struggle with sharing emotions.
Mm-hmm.
And so then coming into that relational dynamic and saying, so if I go back to that story, if we're out on the road and my husband says, get over it, then it requires us to be able to say, that's not helpful. I
Right.
don't want you to speak to me like that.
Right.
Right. And that takes a lot for us to be able to do it, but it also changes the possibility of what could happen. Or you say nothing in the moment, because sometimes in the moment, and you know this, our nervous systems become flooded and we can't possibly say anything. We come back to it later and say, hey, those are
Mm-hmm.
moments where I need compassion and kindness.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not going to work when you come to me this way. And maybe, I know you're my partner and I know you care for me and that it's not your intention to come to me with such harshness. But goodness, that was really harsh.
Mm-hmm.
And so I need, right? So we're giving our partners the benefit of the doubt, but we're giving them feedback.
Mm-hmm.
And to build a strong partnership, it is about feedback back and forth.
Yes.
And then it's also about making mistakes.
Mm-hmm.
So your partner in that moment might have had a hard day, or they were thinking about something that happened for them, or they were worried about their toddler crossing the street, whatever that could be. Then how do we navigate that together and come back and repair? So
Mm-hmm.
that's kind of the first piece is let's look at this in terms of missing skills. Partners don't have skills all the time. We need to learn those skills. How do we do this together? How do we start having these relationship conversations?
Mm-hmm.
But then the other piece is sometimes it's about being confrontational. It's about going to them and saying, this isn't working. We are not feeling good. I'm not good. And if I'm not good, how do we then work together so that we both feel good?
Mm-hmm.
Because I think it's so important, Brooke, is that in relationships, we often say, well, this is just how it is. And at some point you come to this moment of saying, I'm not going to do this anymore. I
Mm-hmm.
can't do this.
Mm-hmm.
Can't do this anymore.
Yeah, I for sure got to that point.
Yeah.
With Jonathan, I think that I recognized that I was drowning, but yet I could not do it anymore, but yet I had a family. I had 2 children. And I think it's really I think 2 things that are probably important for everyone here is I do believe, and I have seen it. Like I have to be honest with you. When I first started doing this work, I had my own projected fear that by supporting, and in the beginning, I supported women, and now I support all humans, and mostly just mothers in the beginning, and now I do it all.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I projected this fear that if we learn to regulate our nervous system, if we learn to support our feelings, our emotions, we learn as a woman to verbalize them. And if we learn to request our needs, our partner's going to say F you and run. And I had this fear that because when I did that, it wasn't received well. And so I had this projected fear that that would happen in other relationships. And yes, I will say that for me, that is what happened. It didn't go over well.
Yeah.
However, I have seen over and over and over again that partnerships rise and they can rise and dynamics can change. And so for anyone who's listening to this, I will validate and understand if it's like, nope, that's not my partner won't change. Like, I don't want them to feel alone. But the other ones who are like, I do want to change and we haven't tried this and I want to see a change, hands down, so many partnerships like over and over and over. And I would say that's 99% of our clients is their partnerships rise because we are learning these tools and to speak up for ourselves or to say the things. So it's not always too late to be like, well, I've patterned this and like they've told me to get over it forever and I've never told them like, hey, that hurts or hey, can we not
Mhm.
speak like that to me or like whatever it is. Try it out because it is okay for the dynamic to shift. The caveat to that, and I know you'll agree with me on this, is that it's not going to happen overnight. It's not going to
Yeah.
be this thing that's like, well, we've been going at it, seeing a therapist for a month and like they're still barking orders at me. It's
Right.
that's not realistic, you know?
And let's even put that into, so absolutely, Brooke, I agree. Let's even put that therapist for a month into context. If you were going weekly sessions, that's 4 sessions.
Right.
So that's 4 hours. But then think of how many hours in that month you live dealing with your partner. And
Mhm.
then think about how many hours in your life you have lived with this conflict. And then think of how many hours in your life you have lived with the belief about yourself and other people. And so this takes time and it takes work. And the piece you were touching in there is the willingness to be uncomfortable.
Yep.
Because you going to your partner and saying, this isn't working for me
Mhm.
is so uncomfortable.
So uncomfortable. So
And
like I've like
have
had to coach people through. I'm like, they're like,
yes.
what do I say again? What do I do? I'm like, just like practice it right now. Like just practice it.
Yeah.
Like we got this. You can do this.
Right. And to then also the goal is not, and I think this is the piece, is we often tackle these really big hard conversations with the desire, and we can think about this with anybody, with family members, with in-laws, with even with kids, with our parents, with our bosses. The goal of these hard conversations is not so that the other person says, oh, Brooke, you're right.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you for telling me how harsh I've been to you. Of course, that makes so much
I was so
sense.
wrong. Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yep.
Most people do not show up to our conversations that way. So we prepare ourselves, but instead we say, am I willing to be uncomfortable in order to shift our relationship into the way we want it to be. And
Mhm.
that's the long term, that's the value, that's the meaning in life, rather than looking for the short term, which is because I want us to not be fighting, because I want us to not be uncomfortable, because I want us to whatever that short term thing is.
Mhm. Yeah,
Yeah.
and I like
It's
that
done.
we can't go into the conversation hoping that our partner will be like, "Oh my gosh, I was wrong. You're so right." I
Mhm.
believe that that's when it's like this tit for tat and this bickering match like just explodes because we
Right.
are wanting to prove like, no, 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 like you hurt me, like that hurt. And we are wanting our partner to say, you are so right. I was so wrong. And I do believe that we need to sit with our emotions and ask ourselves, what do we want from the conversation? And if we can ask ourselves, what do we want from the conversation? Sometimes we don't want anything. Sometimes we do have a need of like, I need you to not speak to me like that or whatever it is, right? Other
Mhm.
times we just want to feel seen and heard of just like, thanks for sharing. Like that's it. Sometimes we just need to say the thing.
Mhm.
And I would love your opinion on this as well. I personally believe that wait, like you're saying, wait until your nervous system is calm, cool, and collected. Give it a moment, but I oftentimes find that we wait until we are literally going to combust, like to the point where we're like, we are ripping things out of the closet from like years ago because it's never been spoken about. So it's like when all the gloves come off, it's like all guns blazing. And if you can have these hard conversations, which are so uncomfortable, number one, I believe they do get more comfortable because you're putting in the reps and
Yep.
practicing it. But number
Yep.
two, you're saying the things that are happening in real time so that you can nip it in the bud and don't have that full blown combustion of a conversation, you know?
There's almost two parts here. One is the holding in. So let's label it. One is the holding in the years and years and years of resentment or anger and frustration of all the times you've done this. And then the other is this experience of and I have great fights that show up in my office. Couples fight about how to boil water
Yeah.
or what's for dinner or right, it's all of those things. That's and sometimes even, they'll laugh and be like, "Oh yeah, Dr. Tracy, you won't believe this one that we had this week," right? And we can laugh at it. But often it's the take the elevator downstairs
Mm,
into your gut, into your body, and ask yourself, what is this really about for
yep.
me? And we can often find that thread in our history as well. What's this about? I was working with a woman recently, and it was about this deep, deep desire for validation. And so then her partner would dismiss, which was not an intentional thing, but more of this piece around who he is as a person and his way of responding and problem solving. But it felt very dismissive to her. And she's like, I just want you to validate me. And we had to figure out, well, what does that really symbolize for me, for you?
Mhm.
If your partner can do that. And if your partner's not able to do that, then also, what would it be like for you to do it for yourself?
Mhm.
And to maybe patch up the bucket that has a hole in it
Mhm.
and to start saying, I'm okay.
Mhm.
I am okay. And no, he can't quite give it to me the way I need. I can start giving this to myself.
Mhm. Yeah, and I think that kind of relates back to what you were saying in the beginning of not ever feeling good enough or not feeling worthy enough, right? If we find that externally or crave that externally, that external validation will always be needed, right? To be able to go the
Mhm.
distance or to, you know, feel like you've achieved something or feel like you are successful at something. But if you go internal and give it to yourself, then you're not looking for it outside of you. And then you feel that self worth inside. You've built that self worth for yourself. You've built that validation for yourself of, wow, I did that pretty darn well. Or, wow, I snapped at my kids today, but like the rest of the day went really darn well. And I,
And
you
that's
know,
not attached to my
yeah.
worthiness. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and I turned it around and, like, that was a moment. That was a moment. That was not an hour. That was not a whole day. That was not a whole week. Like, it was just a moment, and, like, I'm totally allowed to have a moment, you know? And giving
Mhm.
that to yourself allows you to, I believe, find that release of like enmeshment within a relationship and really be more, I don't want to say independent because I do believe that you need interdependence within a relationship to some extent.
Yep.
But finding that independent way of standing on your own 2 feet to allow for that interdependent relationship, if you will.
Yeah. Yeah, I
Mhm.
would label that as differentiation in the sense that I am different from you. I can do this for myself. If you can't do it for me, that doesn't mean that I don't deserve it or that I'm not good enough.
Mhm.
And being able to understand your context, which might be you don't know how to do this, and that's hard for you.
Mhm.
And at the same time, recognizing, and I think this is a piece where we're really tripping up with right now is that we turn to our one person, and Esther Perel really does a great job talking about this. We turn to our one person and we expect them to give us all of our needs. And that's just not possible. And that one person can't do all of that. We need to get our needs filled up by multiple different people in different areas in our life. And so then that says, okay, you are my partner and you give me this piece, but I also know this other piece I get from somebody else, this other piece I get over here, I get this piece from work. And I think that's really important so that it's not just on our partner's job to do for us.
I had a long term, it was really my first long term boyfriend in college. And we dated for 3 years. He totally thought we were like, this was it. Like, and for a little bit, I was like, this is it too. Um, I will never forget, we were sitting in the back of his mom's minivan. We would often go home to where he lived because my grandmother also was living there with her twin. So we would go visit in Detroit every now and then when I was up in college. And his mom said that. She was like, and she had actually just recently gone through a divorce. And she was like, not like one person can serve every single need for you in your life. And my jaw like dropped. And I was like, what do you mean? What are you talking about? Like, your person is your person. Like, that's your person who like it's your everything. And she was like, no, you need, some relationships serve the purpose of this or that, and then you have friends for this, and you have some more talkative friends, and you have some more vulnerable friends, and you have some you can call when you need to go out for a fun night, and you have some that are more adventurous that you can go travel with her. And I was like I literally was like dumbfounded. I was like, what are you talking about? And I have clearly taken that moment and really put it to work, if you will, and made sure to understand that about a relationship. And um I would say that I tried really hard to practice that within my dynamic with Jonathan, and I almost did it to a fault or like a detriment almost of our relationship because things weren't going well. And so I did rely so heavily on everything else going on in my life to enjoy my life, if you will. And
Mhm.
I have found a much better balance, which everyone knows. Like, everyone knows who listen to my podcast. I hate the word balance because it's like that word is
Yeah, it
just
doesn't
so
exist.
false.
Yeah.
But I do believe I have found a better balance with this partnership of Carter does fulfill a lot of those spaces for me. And
Mm.
I have never felt such a safety or a level of trust and support within a dynamic of a supportive relationship. And so, probably because I've never felt that, I am enjoying that and embracing that and all of the different things. And as well as moving through my own, unpacking of my bricks and relationships, hands down, I would say take a lot more effort than people
Mm.
care to realize. And I think that I let Jonathan and I think our relationship went by the wayside as soon as we had kids. But I think that moving into this already having kids, I recognized how important it is to have time with your partner and have communication with your partner. And I honestly don't think people realize like it's like another full-time job to really, really work on your relationship.
You're touching on the intentionality. And it's so interesting because when we start dating each other, we're so intentional.
Totally.
We hold the other person in our mind. We think of the things that they would like. We do the things for them that we know they like. We're curious. We want to
Totally.
learn more about them. We have more compassion and empathy. And right, it's all of those feel good limerence, honeymoon stage
Yep.
vibes. And yet it is so fascinating because as this person becomes the most important person that you're spending day in and day out with, then we put them on the back burner. And especially when kids come along. And it really does challenge that connection. And it's not to say, here's the piece. And it's such a balance because I know, and I know this from my heart because we didn't have family support in the city with us when we had kids. And that made it so difficult for us to have date nights once a month or once a week. It was really hard to find trusted others to come into our home with an 8-month old, even to look after them so we could do this thing called dating each other. So I have so much compassion for that. And we have to then find the ways where we can keep that spark alive
Totally.
and it's not, you don't get the date nights of being out until 3 a.m. I mean, maybe you do and that's your thing, that's great, but most parents do not go out until 3 a.m. when they get the babysitter,
Yeah.
and that's okay, but you reframe what connection looks like and you keep coming back together. I had someone send me a DM once saying, why would I ask questions to my partner? There's nothing to talk about. And there's so much to discover about the other person still. It's just whether we're doing that and making time for it and being curious like we once were. There's so
Mhm.
much in there. But yeah, we definitely get stuck as parents, as couples.
Yeah, it definitely takes effort and there is so much to learn. And I do believe that if we put in the effort and know that we are a priority, plus our children are a priority,
Mhm.
um, that is giving you a whole fulfilled life, not just one or the other.
Yeah.
And I want to do things with my partner versus I've been in a relationship where it was different and I wanted to do things with just my girlfriends and I wanted to get out, like I wanted to get away, take a break, kind of a feeling if you will. And this is more of I enjoy doing things with him. Like I enjoy him being there alongside of me. I enjoy having experiences with him, but it hasn't come without its effort because I do have a lot of bricks and we did have to unpack a lot of
Mhm.
stuff and
Yes.
and we still have bricks to unpack and on his side too because we all have a bag that we're carrying. We all have things that have affected our life. I think the craziest thing is that we choose to have a partner. We choose to marry this partner. We choose to be in a committed relationship with this partner. Yet, most often, I find that so many are not saying the things that need to be said. And it's like mind blowing to me because it's like, but this is the person you chose to be your most authentic
Mm.
self with. And we just, I think we're so afraid of either the deflection back of like not accepting what we're saying, or we're so afraid that it'll be shot down that we hold it in because we care the most about that person's opinion or we care the most about that person's reaction. But I would love for you to speak a little bit to couples and not saying the hard things.
That is, in a way, an adaptive coping strategy when we don't say the hard things. So, again, when we look at our partner, it's not just your partner that you're seeing, but it's the history of people. So, if you were previously in an abusive or with a narcissistic person, or if you have someone in your family that would always flip things around on you, you look at your whole history. Those people are standing behind your partner when you look at them. And so you're not seeing them. And maybe they do have that history of deflecting or dismissing you when you do say the hard thing. But we then act from that place. And so it's a self protective mechanism to then not say the thing to them. But what is so important is to recognize our agency that we do have in this relationship. This person in front of you is, they are not that person from your past. You
Mm-hmm.
can make different choices today in terms of how you show up.
Totally.
And when we lean into that fear, then we're more likely to get what it is that we want or the information that we need to know. If you repeatedly get uncomfortable and say to your partner, I need this, and repeatedly they say, no, I can't do that for you, then you know where they are instead of kind of this whole other dance piece. And then you get to decide. And I do believe, Brooke, that more people today are deciding, I don't want to stay in this partnership then.
Mm-hmm.
It's not working for me. I
Mm-hmm.
need something different.
Mm-hmm.
And it really is that I am going to say the hard thing and it might be messy and I'll have to find a way to work through that.
Mm-hmm. And I think, I don't think I've ever said this before on the podcast, and I'm sure you would agree with me because how for as many years as you've been doing this, I am certain that you've gone through supportive breakups with couples as well. But it is okay if it doesn't work out. Like it is okay. And I'm speaking
Yeah.
from someone who like it didn't work out. Like
Yep.
my children are okay. And I
Yeah.
was so afraid of, oh my gosh, like there were so many worries and fears. And is it easy? Like no, it's not an easy thing to separate a family. It's not an easy thing to have two separate households and two separate incomes. Like it's an adjustment, it's a shift, and it takes a year or two. But there are multiple, like what I was telling myself and Jonathan and I separated was there's so many people who do this every single day
Yep.
and they are all okay and they are all fine in the long run and this will be okay. And it is okay.
There's another piece in there too that I know a lot of women particularly, but also men will say will work on in some way, which is I do know how to do those things.
Mm,
I do know how to pay bills. I do know how to manage finances. And if I don't, I know how to find the resource to learn how to do the thing. You are capable and this is possible. And so I think when we start to give ourselves that possibility there, and it's so challenging, Brooke. I do work with a lot of people who struggle in this for years of do I stay or do I
yep.
go? And one of that, I'm staying because of the kids. And the conversation we end up having is what are you modeling to your children about
Mm-hmm.
love, about what it means to be loved,
Mm-hmm.
about a healthy relationship?
Mm-hmm.
And for people who say, well, we don't fight in front of the kids, I challenge that and I say, what are you teaching them by the absence of emotional connection?
1,000%. A
And our
thousand
children are
percent.
learning. They're learning from us, from what we say or don't say. And, you know, we, the way we talk about things, they're learning, they're internalizing that voice, they're internalizing what it means to treat each other. And all of that to say with compassion, I know, and I've worked with many people who have deeply struggled with this. And the societal messaging that always comes first is, but what about the kids?
Yes.
And I often think, but what about her?
Mm-hmm.
Or what about them? What about
Mm-hmm.
him, right? That like it's you matter too.
Yes. Yeah. I oftentimes, every now and then, when Carter and I are hugging or kissing or something like that, the kids will be like, ew, or like, they'll say something. And I'm like, this is good. Like, this is good if we are that connected to a space where they're like, ew, because that means that we're demonstrating our love
Mhm.
for one another in front of them and modeling that and showing
Yes.
them what a connected partnership looks like. And I 1,000% agree. For as someone who's been through it, I think the first thing that came to my mind was, but what about the kids? Like, That is
Yeah.
honestly the reason I never did it, and I just waited for Jonathan to do it, is because, and there were other reasons too, but I I struggled desperately with it, of like, "Oh my gosh, can I actually break up a family?" And it is okay to find happiness in the one life that you choose. Not to say just go jump and do it. Like, there's, like we were talking about in the beginning, like, dynamics shifts can happen, change can happen. Put in the work. Like, Jonathan and I tried and tried and tried. We did everything we could. Um, but it is also okay to have a beautiful uncoupling, if you will.
Mhm. Yes, of course, and
Mhm.
to redefine what family looks like
Yep,
and how other supportive people can come into their life and
absolutely.
teach them things. Yeah.
Yeah. Dr. Tracy
Relationships are
would
so complex and just for listeners to remember seasons. We also go
seasons. So
through
true.
seasons in our relationship. So, that idea of and this was interesting because my husband and I had this conversation on the couch one day around, gosh, we wish we had that freedom to just go for dinner when we wanted to,
Mhm.
or to have the weekend getaway like we once did. And
Yep.
that connection between the two of us, both saying, we look forward to when
Yes.
this changes,
Yes.
that is a connection in itself. Even when we're
Yes.
sleepless still and exhausted and soccer and dance and all the things.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, 1,000%. Things to look forward to, and it also makes
Mhm.
it, when you do get to slip away, that much more meaningful,
Yes.
you know?
Yeah.
I would love for you to share with everyone where they can find you.
Yes, my main hangout is on Instagram. It's at Dr. Tracy D. And I've got all kinds of resources there. If you are in that season of this is so hard to connect, my daily rituals guide is one of my favorite ones, or my 100 questions to deepen your connection. These ones are just this is actionable for you. It's not going to take a lot of time. Put it into place and start deepening that connection and re meeting each other, getting to
Yeah,
know each other again.
I love that. Thank you so much for being here and for
Thank you.
joining us and for giving us all the good advice on relationships and partnerships. And until next time, XOXO, Dr. B.